The millionaire had no idea she was the one caring for his daughter. The ending is shocking. The sun had not yet broken the horizon when Edward Miller was already passing through the gate of his mansion on the Bishop's Avenue, London. At 42, he commanded one of the largest real estate empires in the country, with development spread across all the major cities in the home counties. His name was synonymous with success in the financial papers, but few knew the price he paid for that life of appearances. Inside the luxury sedan, as his driver navigated the still empty streets, Edward allowed himself a brief moment to think about the only person who truly mattered, Laura, his 3-year-old daughter. The little girl was all that was left of Anne Claire, the great love of his life. 3 years ago, when Laura was born, Edward had to make the most difficult choice a man could face. Anne Claire did not survive the complications of childbirth, and he found himself alone with a newborn in his arms and an emptiness in his chest that seemed impossible to fill. In the first few months between million-pound meetings and negotiations, Edward would come, home only to hold his daughter and cry in silence, feeling the weight of absence and responsibility. It was Mrs. Irene who saved those dark days. The governess had been working for the family for years, having been hired by Anne Claire during her pregnancy to help with preparations. A widow with no children of her own at 55 years old, and with a lifetime dedicated to caring for other people's homes, Irene took Laura in as if she were her own flesh and blood. She would wake before dawn to prepare the bottles, change diapers with infinite patience, and sing lullabies in a soft voice that calmed the most desperate cries. Edward saw a blessing in that humble woman, but he also recognized that a child needed more than a governess, no matter how dedicated she was. 18 months after the tragedy, pressured by his family and the feeling that Laura deserved an official mother figure, Edward met Camilla Anderson at a charity event at the Balmoral Hotel in Edinburgh. She was 28, had a degree in public relations, possessed a stunning beauty that turned heads wherever she went, and displayed a rehearsed charm that won everyone over. When Edward mentioned he had a young daughter, Camilla melted into praise about how much she loved children and dreamed of being a mother. The Miller family approved of the relationship immediately. Within 6 months, they were married. The ceremony was grand, with over 300 guests, coverage in society magazines, and a honeymoon in Paris. When they returned to London, Camilla assumed her role as lady of the house with impeccable elegance. She dressed in designer clothes, frequented the best beauty salons, organized sophisticated dinners, and attended social events always by her husband's side, smiling for the cameras. In the photos published in the society columns, she appeared holding Laura in her lap, kissing the girl's forehead, posing as the loving mother everyone believed her to be. Edward wanted to believe it. He needed to believe it. He left home at 5:30 in the morning and rarely returned before 9 at night. His routine was relentless: meetings with investors, site inspections, contract negotiations, business trips that took him away for days on end. When he arrived home, he would find Laura already asleep, Camilla dressed up and perfumed, reporting how wonderful the day had been with her stepdaughter, and Mrs. Irene moving silently through the house, finishing the domestic chores. He would thank his wife, kiss his sleeping daughter's forehead, and retreat to his office to review contracts until exhaustion overcame him. On weekends, Camilla shone. When there were lunches with the Miller family or visits from friends, she would hold Laura's hand, comb the girl's hair with colorful ribbons, and pretend to play with her in the garden while the guests praised her dedication. Edward's mother, Mrs. Teresa, constantly repeated how lucky he was to have found such a special woman who had accepted raising the child of another. Marriage with so much love. His brothers-in-law agreed, impressed. Even the most senior employees at his company commented on the positive transformation Camilla had brought to their boss's life. But Mrs. Irene knew the truth, and she kept silent. When the house emptied and the doors closed, Camilla transformed. The mask of sweetness would fall like a dress discarded at the end of a party. She slept until 10 in the morning, woke up complaining of a headache, went down to the kitchen only to drink a green juice prepared by Irene, and returned to her room with her phone in hand, browsing online shopping sites or chatting with friends about parties and trips. Laura, awake since 6 in the morning under the governess's care, would try to approach her stepmother seeking affection, but was systematically ignored. One Tuesday morning, Laura came down the stairs holding her teddy bear, her eyes still sleepy, looking for Camilla, who was in the living room on her tablet. The girl approached with hesitant steps and held out her little arms, wanting to be held. Camilla quickly looked up, sized the child up and down, and wrinkled her nose in disgust. "You're all covered. In coffee, Laura. Don't touch me, you'll stain my clothes. Irene!" The governess emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron, and Camilla pointed to the girl with disdain. "Take this child away. Give her a proper bath. I can't stand it when she gets clingy like this." Irene picked Laura up tenderly, discreetly wiping away a tear that was running down the child's face. "Come, my love, let's take a bath, and then we can play with your dolls, okay?" Laura nodded, but her eyes remained fixed on Camilla, searching for something she would never find. The stepmother had already returned her attention to the screen, selecting a £5,000 imported handbag. Minutes later, Edward came down the stairs adjusting his tie, checking his wristwatch. Camilla immediately put the tablet away, stood up, and walked over to him with a radiant smile. "Good morning, my love. Laura has had her breakfast. I've already bathed her, and now Irene is helping her get dressed. You don't have to worry about a thing." Edward kissed his wife's forehead, grateful. "You're incredible, Camilla. I don't know what we'd do without you." She tilted her head with feigned modesty. "It's my role. Edward, I love taking care of her." He said goodbye and left for another day of work, carrying in his chest the certainty that he had made the right choice in remarrying. As soon as the sound of the car faded into the distance, Camilla returned to the sofa and resumed her shopping, without even glancing towards the upstairs, where Laura was playing with Irene, calling the governess Mummy for the 10th time that morning. The routine repeated itself with methodical cruelty. Every morning Irene would wake at 5 to prepare the house, warm the bottle, change Laura, and play with her until the girl settled down. Camilla only came downstairs when she had social commitments or when Edward was home. On the days she was alone with her stepdaughter and the governess, she barely spoke a word to either of them. When Laura cried, Camilla would lock herself in her room, claiming she needed to rest. When the girl tried to enter the living room to play, Camilla would shoo her away, saying she didn't want a mess on the Persian rugs. When Irene asked for instructions about the child's food or schedule, Camilla would roll her eyes and tell her to figure it out herself. After all, what was a governess for? And Irene figured it out. She lifted Laura from her bed every morning with kisses on her face, sang songs during bath time, prepared porridges and purees with the utmost care, played with dolls on the bedroom floor, told stories before the afternoon nap, taught her the first words, and celebrated each milestone as if she were her own daughter. Laura responded with pure, unconditional love. Her first steps were taken towards Irene. Her first complete word was "Mummy," looking directly at the governess. And every time this happened in Camilla's presence, the tension in the air became palpable. One Thursday afternoon, Irene was in Laura's room, assembling an animal puzzle, when the girl, excited, shouted, "Look, Mummy, I did it!" Camilla, who was passing by in the hallway at that moment, stopped at the door with her arms crossed. Her eyes narrowed dangerously. "Irene, come here." The governess stood up immediately, sensing the danger in her employer's voice. Camilla waited for her to approach, and then whispered with venom, "Control this. She can't keep calling you Mummy. You are an employee, do you understand? An employee. If my husband hears this, he'll find it strange, and I won't let you plant wrong ideas in this child's head." Irene lowered her eyes, clasping her hands. "I don't encourage it, Mrs. Camilla. She's little. She doesn't understand yet." Camilla took a step forward, invading the governess's personal space. "Then make her understand. Correct her. Every time she calls you that, you stop and tell her you're not her mother. I am her mother." Irene felt her heart ache, but she nodded. "Yes, ma'am." Camilla gave a cold smile and walked away, returning to her room. Irene remained standing, in the hallway, fighting back tears, knowing she could never bring herself to correct Laura, because the truth was that, in everything but name and blood, She truly was that child's mother. The weeks passed, and Camilla's farce became increasingly elaborate. She had learned perfectly when to pretend and when to reveal her true nature. At the business dinners Edward hosted at home, Camilla would appear stunning in haute couture dresses, greet guests with charm, and at the exact moment the partners' wives asked about motherhood, she would sigh with rehearsed tenderness and recount how rewarding it was to watch Laura grow, how they spent their days playing together, how the girl had become beautifully attached to her. The women would be moved, praising her generosity in loving a child who was not biologically hers. Edward, hearing this from a distance while discussing contracts, felt his chest swell with pride. What he didn't see were the scenes that took place on the mornings following these events. Camilla would wake up in a bad mood, complaining she had drunk too much wine, that her head was throbbing, that she needed absolute silence. When Laura, innocent, entered her parents' room looking for her stepmother, Camilla would explode with irritation. "Get out of here, I can't stand this noise. Irene, get this child out of my sight." The governess would come running, pick Laura up, and take her to the garden, inventing games to distract the girl from the rejection she had just suffered. Laura didn't understand why the woman who smiled at her in front of guests treated her with such coldness when they were alone. In mid-June, the Miller family organized a birthday lunch for Mrs. Teresa at Edward's house. Camilla prepared for days, choosing the perfect dress, planning the menu, with a catering company, decorating the house with expensive flowers. On the day of the event, she was flawless. She held Laura's hand, introduced the girl to relatives as "my little daughter," and smiled for photos where she kissed the child's cheek. Mrs. Teresa moved, hugged Camilla and thanked her for bringing joy back into Edward and Laura's lives. "You are a blessing to this family, my dear. Anne Claire would be happy to know her daughter is in good hands." Camilla responded with false tears in her eyes. "I do everything out of love, Mrs. Teresa. Laura is my princess." Edward, watching the scene from afar, felt a lump in his throat. He thought of Anne Claire, of how grateful she would be to know her daughter had such a dedicated new mother. He approached the two of them and hugged Camilla by the waist, whispering in her ear, "Thank you for everything you do for us." She returned the hug, but her eyes, when they shifted away from her husband, were empty of any genuine emotion. As soon as the guests left and Edward went upstairs to change, Camilla finally relaxed her posture. She kicked off her high heels with a sigh of relief, threw herself on the sofa, and picked up her phone. Laura, still in her party dress, approached, wanting to show a drawing she had made during the afternoon. "Look, Mummy Camilla, I made this for you." The stepmother barely glanced at the paper. "Just leave it there and go play in your room, I'm tired," the girl insisted, touching Camilla's arm. "But I made it with love." Camilla brushed the child's hand away with a sharp movement. "I said I'm tired. Irene, come get this girl." Irene appeared from the kitchen, where she was helping the catering staff clear the dishes. She took Laura's hand gently. "Come, my love, let's put your drawing on the fridge, where it will look lovely." Laura handed the paper to the governess, her eyes shining with unshed tears. As they went upstairs, Camilla was already on the phone with a friend, laughing loudly about how she had managed to fool her mother-in-law once again. You should have seen the old woman's face, thinking I'm some kind of saint. If only she knew I can barely stand to be near that whiny kid. Irene heard everything but continued on, taking Laura to her room. There she helped the girl out of her party dress, put on comfortable pajamas, and sat on the bed beside her. "Do you want me to read you a story?" Laura nodded, snuggling into the governess's lap. "Do you like me, Mummy Irene?" The question broke the woman's heart. She hugged the child tightly, kissing the top of her head. "I love you more than anything in this world, my little one. Never forget that." Laura smiled, finally at peace, and fell asleep in the arms of the one who truly loved her. July and August brought an intense cold to London. Edward had to travel to Edinburgh and Manchester for negotiations that stretched on for weeks. He called home every night, asking about Laura, and Camilla always had a prepared answer. "She's great, love. We spent the whole afternoon drawing together today. She's growing up so fast you'll be surprised when you get back." Edward would smile on the other end of the line, grateful to have such a present wife. The reality was quite different. With Edward away, Camilla didn't even bother to keep up appearances. She spent her days locked in her room-watching series, went out for lunch with friends at the city's most expensive shopping centres, and returned late at night with shopping bags. Laura was left entirely in Irene's care. The governess took over everything, waking the girl, giving her breakfast, playing, teaching her the first letters of the alphabet, preparing lunch and dinner, bathing her, and putting her to bed. It was almost 16 hours a day of uninterrupted dedication, but Irene didn't complain. That child had become the reason for her existence. One Thursday afternoon, Camilla came home early and found Irene and Laura playing house in the living room. The girl was laughing, pretending to serve tea to the governess, who was participating in the game with genuine enthusiasm. The scene irritated Camilla deeply, not because she felt any emotional jealousy, but because it was a threat. If someone witnessed that intimacy between the employee and the child, they might start asking inconvenient questions. She clapped her hands sharply, getting their attention. "Irene, don't you have work to do? The house doesn't clean itself." The governess stood up immediately. "Yes, ma'am, I was just—" Camilla cut her off with an impatient gesture. "I'm not interested. Laura, go play in your room. The living room is not a playground." The girl looked to Irene for support, but the governess just gave an encouraging nod. "Go on, my love. I'll be up in a little while." Laura obeyed, dragging her feet across the floor, visibly disappointed. As soon as the child was out of sight, Camilla approached Irene with blazing eyes. "I've already warned you not to create this much intimacy with her. You are overstepping your boundaries. I am her mother, not you. If I catch you two in this happy family scene again, you'll be looking for another job. Understood?" Irene swallowed hard, feeling her hands tremble. "Yes, Mrs. Camilla, I'm sorry." The employer gave a venomous smile. "And one more thing. The next time she calls you Mummy, I want you to tell her that a mother is the one who marries the father, that you are just the maid who takes care of her because you get paid for it. I want to hear you say that." Irene felt hot tears threatening to escape, but forced herself to remain firm. "I can't do that to her, Mom. She's too little. She won't understand." Camilla took another step forward, invading the governess's personal space, her face inches from hers. "You'll do as I say or you'll be fired. And if you're fired, who will take care of her? Me? Do you really think I'm going to give baths, change diapers, put up with crying? Think carefully about what's best for Laura before you defy me." With that, Camilla turned and went up to her room, leaving Irene alone in the living room, trembling with rage and helplessness. That night, Irene cried for the first time since she had started working in that house. She cried in the staff bathroom, with the tap running to muffle the sound, feeling trapped in an impossible situation. If she told Edward the truth, she would be fired on the spot by Camilla, and Laura would be left completely unprotected. If she remained silent, she would continue to be humiliated and witness the emotional neglect the child suffered daily. There was no way out, or rather there was only one: to continue loving Laura in secret, protecting her as best she could, and praying that one day the truth would come out on its own. When Edward finally returned, from his trip at the beginning of September, he brought gifts for everyone. For Camilla, a diamond necklace bought from a jeweller in Edinburgh. For Laura, an imported doll that talked and sang songs. And for Irene, a box of fine chocolates, thanking her for taking such good care of the house and his daughter during his absence. Camilla received her gift with effusive kisses and thanks. Laura hugged the doll with joy, but soon dropped it to run to her father and hug him tightly. And Irene accepted the chocolates with a discreet smile, holding in her heart the bitterness of knowing that this good, hard-working man was being deceived every day under his own roof. September brought with it the promise of spring and also a subtle change in the mansion's routine. Edward began to notice small details that had previously gone unnoticed. One morning, coming downstairs earlier than usual, he found Irene already in the kitchen preparing Laura's bottle, while Camilla was still fast asleep upstairs. He commented casually, "You wake up very early, Irene. Camilla doesn't need to worry about these things. You're already here." The governess smiled awkwardly. "I like waking up early, Mr. Miller, and Mrs. Camilla needs her rest. She does so much during the day. Edward accepted the explanation without question. After all, Camilla always reported her exhausting afternoons taking care of Laura, and he had no reason to doubt her. But that same week, during a quick breakfast before leaving for the office, Laura ran down the stairs and shouted excitedly, "Mummy!" Edward smiled, expecting the girl to run to Camilla, but Laura ran straight past her stepmother and threw herself into the arms of Irene, who was setting the table. The silence that followed was awkward. Camilla cleared her throat and said quickly, "She's still confused with her words, darling. I'm teaching her, but it takes a while." Edward nodded, but a seed of doubt was planted. Why did his daughter call the governess Mummy and not his wife? He pushed the thought away, attributing it to the child's age and her natural closeness to Irene. He said goodbye with a kiss for Camilla and left for another day of work. But that scene kept replaying in his mind all morning. In the afternoon, during a particularly tedious meeting about urban zoning, Edward found himself thinking about his daughter. When was the last time he had really spent time with Laura? When was the last time he had seen her play, laugh, run in the garden? Guilt tightened its grip on his chest. He was building a financial empire, but losing the precious years of his only daughter's childhood. That night, Edward came home determined to change. He went straight up to Laura's room and found the girl already in her pajamas, sitting on the bed with Irene beside her, reading a storybook. Camilla was nowhere in sight. "Can I join?" he asked from the doorway. Laura lit up and waved enthusiastically. Edward sat on the other side of the bed and listened as Irene finished the story of Little Red Riding Hood. When the governess closed the book, Laura yawned and snuggled between her father and Irene. "Good night, Daddy. Good night, Mummy." Edward felt his body tense. The girl had called Irene Mummy again, and this time he was there to hear it clearly. Irene stood up quickly, visibly uncomfortable. "I'll leave you two to talk. Good night, Mr. Miller. Good night, Laura." She hurried out of the room, and Edward was left alone with his daughter. He lay down beside her and stroked her hair. "Laura, do you know who Camilla is?" The girl thought for a moment. "She's the woman who lives here." Edward felt a knot in his stomach. "She's your mother, honey. You should call her Mummy." Laura made a face. "But she doesn't like to play with me. Mummy Irene plays with me." Edward didn't know what to say. He kissed his daughter's forehead and wished her good night, leaving the room with more questions than answers. He went downstairs and found Camilla in the living room, watching a reality show on the giant screen television. He sat down. Next to her, turned off the TV and turned to her seriously. "We need to talk." Camilla frowned, surprised. "About what?" Edward chose his words carefully. "Laura called you the woman who lives here, and she calls Irene Mummy. Doesn't that worry you?" Camilla sighed dramatically, as if dealing with a trivial matter. "Edward, she's 3 years old. Children at that age get things mixed up. Irene spends more time with her because I have other responsibilities around the house. But I'm always present when it matters." Edward wanted to believe her, but something in that explanation sounded false. "What? Responsibilities? We have maids for cleaning, a cook for the meals. What do you do during the day?" Camilla sensed the ground was becoming dangerous. She stood up and walked over to him, running her hands over her husband's shoulders with calculated affection. "Darling, I take care of 1,000 things you don't even see. I supervise the staff, organize the house, plan our meals, take care of Laura when she needs me. You're stressed from work and projecting it onto me. It's not fair." She kissed him softly, and Edward, exhausted and wanting to avoid conflict, gave in. "I'm sorry, you're right, I'm just tired." But the seed of doubt had sprouted. In the following days, Edward began to observe more closely. He noticed that on the mornings he came down early, Camilla was never taking care of Laura. He noticed that when he came home at night, it was always Irene who was with the girl, while Camilla only appeared to greet him. He started paying attention to how Laura reacted differently to the two women. She sought Irene for everything, but avoided Camilla, becoming tense in her presence. That wasn't normal. A 3-year-old child had no reason to avoid her own mother unless something was wrong. In mid-October, on a Wednesday, Edward had a crucial 9 o'clock meeting with Japanese investors interested in a £1 billion project for a commercial building complex in central London. He left the house at 7, mentally reviewing all the details of the proposal during the drive. He arrived at the office, prepared the conference room, and waited. At 8:40, his assistant rushed in with frustrating news. The investors had cancelled the meeting due to an urgent family matter that required their immediate return to Japan. They would reschedule for the following month. Edward dismissed his team and sat alone in the empty office, pondering what to do with his unexpectedly free morning. He could review contracts, get ahead on reports, make calls. But a different idea came to mind. How long had it been since he'd spent a morning at home? How long had it been since he'd seen Laura awake and playing? He grabbed his car keys and decided to go home, surprise the family, maybe have a quiet breakfast with Camilla and Laura. The idea cheered him. He called his driver to dismiss him and drove back to the Bishop's Avenue himself. It was 9:15 when Edward parked in the mansion's garage. He entered through the side door which led directly to the kitchen, wanting to surprise Camilla. The house was silent. He walked down the hallway, expecting to find his wife and daughter perhaps having breakfast together, but the kitchen was empty, with only a few dishes left in the sink. He continued to the living room, also empty. It was then that he heard it. A sharp, desperate cry coming from upstairs. It was Laura. Edward felt his blood run cold. He ran up the stairs quickly, following the sound that came from his daughter's room. The door was ajar. Edward stopped before entering instinctively, and what he saw through the crack made his world fall apart. Laura was sitting on the floor, crying uncontrollably, her hands covering her face. Irene was kneeling beside her, trying to calm her with a gentle voice stroking the girl's hair, and Camilla was standing, her back to the door, with her arms crossed and an expression of absolute disgust on her face. "I've already told you I can't stand this crying. Do you think I'm a nanny? I didn't marry Edward to look after some crying brat." Camilla's voice was cold, sharp, completely different from the sweet tone she used in his presence. Irene replied in a trembling but firm voice, "Ma'am, she just wants affection. She's a child." Camilla gave a cruel laugh. "Affection? Then you give it to her. After all, you love playing mummy, don't you? You get paid for it. I'm going to the gym. I can't stand being in this house anymore." Laura held her little arms up to Camilla in a desperate attempt to connect. "Please, Mummy Camilla." The stepmother took a step back as if the girl were contagious. "Don't touch me with those tear-stained hands, Irene. Clean this child up and keep her quiet. When Edward gets home tonight, I don't want to hear a word about this. Understood?" Irene pulled Laura close, hugging her protectively. "Yes, ma'am." Camilla turned to leave the room and nearly bumped into Edward, who remained paralyzed at the door. She let out a cry of shock, placing a hand on her chest. "Edward, what are you doing here?" He didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on Laura, who was still crying in Irene's arms, and then they moved to Camilla, searching for some explanation that would make sense. But what he had seen and heard had no possible justification. The silence in the room was deafening. Camilla tried to compose herself quickly, fixing her hair and forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Darling, you scared me. I thought you were at the office." Edward remained still, processing the scene he had just witnessed. His mind was working at a frantic pace, reconnecting all the pieces that had never quite fit. Camilla's excuses, Laura's attachment to Irene, the strangeness he had always felt but chosen to ignore. It all made sense now, a painful and disturbing sense. Camilla realized she needed to act fast to control the situation. She took a few steps towards her husband, touching his arm gently. "Laura was having a terrible tantrum this morning. You know how difficult children can be sometimes. I was just trying to set some boundaries so she doesn't grow up spoiled." Edward looked away from her and focused on Irene, who was still on the floor with Laura clinging to her neck, the girl's sobs finally subsiding. The governess kept her eyes down, but he could see the silent tears streaming down her face. "Irene, could you leave us alone?" Edward asked in a controlled voice. The governess hesitated, looking at Laura with concern, but she nodded and stood up, carrying the girl in her arms. "Come, my love, let's go wash your face and have some juice." Laura clung to her tightly, murmuring between sobs, Don't go, Mummy Irene. Promise? Irene kissed the child's forehead, glancing quickly at Edward. Never, my little one, I promise. They left the room and Edward closed the door. Camilla braced herself for the storm. She had already planned her defense. She would say she was stressed, that she had overreacted, that she loved Laura, but sometimes motherhood was difficult. She opened her mouth to begin, but Edward held up a hand, silencing her. Don't speak. Not now. His voice was low, dangerously calm. I need to think. I need to get out of here before I do or say something I'll regret. He turned and walked quickly down the stairs, grabbed his car keys, and left the house, leaving Camilla alone in the room, for the first time genuinely worried. Edward drove aimlessly through the streets of London. His mind was a whirlwind of contradictory emotions: anger, disappointment, guilt, sadness. How had he been so blind? How had he not realized that the woman he had married was a complete fraud? And worse, how had he not noticed his own daughter's suffering? Laura had been trying to show him the truth all along, calling Irene Mummy, avoiding Camilla, but he had been too busy to pay attention. The guilt was as heavy as concrete in his chest. He stopped the car at a viewpoint overlooking the city and just sat there trying to organize his thoughts. Confronting Camilla now would be useless. She would deny it, make excuses, and without concrete proof it would be his word against hers. Edward was an experienced businessman. He knew that important decisions couldn't be made in the heat of the moment. He needed proof. He needed irrefutable evidence of what really happened in his house when he wasn't there. And then an idea began to form. He picked up his phone and made a call to a contact he knew from the corporate security business. Robert, it's Edward Miller. I need a discreet and urgent service. Installation of security cameras in my residence. Yes, today if possible. No, my wife can't know. I want hidden cameras in several rooms. Can you do that? On the other end of the line, Robert confirmed he could, and they arranged for that very afternoon. Edward thanked him and hung up, feeling a little more in control. He spent the next few hours driving around the city, processing everything he had discovered. He thought of Anne Claire, of how she had loved Laura even before she was born, of how she had given her life for her daughter, and now that innocent child was being rejected and mistreated by the woman who was supposed to protect her. The pain was almost physical. At 2 p.m, Edward received a message from Robert confirming that the team was on its way to the mansion. He called Camilla. Hi, darling. Her voice was sweet, trying to win back lost ground. Where are you? I'm worried. Edward kept his tone neutral. I had to sort some things out at the office. I'm going to stop by the house quickly this afternoon to pick up some documents. Can you go out and do something? Maybe take Laura for a walk. There was a pause. Camilla certainly didn't want to go out with Laura, but she also didn't want to upset her husband at this delicate moment. Of course, love. I'll take her to the shopping center. It will be good for both of us. Edward hung up, knowing Camilla would never take Laura anywhere. She would delegate it to Irene or simply go out alone. And that's exactly what he wanted. 15 minutes later, he arrived home to find Camilla dressed and ready to leave. Where's Laura? He asked. Irene is giving her a bath. I'll get them and we'll go. Edward nodded. All right, I'll only be here for half an hour. Go ahead and spend the afternoon out. You both deserve it. Camilla agreed, relieved to have an excuse to escape the tension. As soon as Camilla left with Irene and Laura, Edward opened the gate for Robert's team. 3 technicians entered with professional equipment and began to work. In 2 hours, they installed hidden cameras in discrete objects throughout the house. A clock in the living room, a fake book on the shelf, a phone charger in the kitchen, a painting in the hallway, a plant pot in Laura's room. All were connected to a system that Edward could access remotely from his phone or computer. When they finished, Robert showed him how the app worked. The cameras have high-definition audio and video, continuous recording with cloud storage. You can watch live or review the history. No one will notice. Edward tested the system, seeing the crystal-clear image of the empty living room. He thanked them and paid in cash, asking for absolute discretion. Robert assured him and left with his team. Edward was left alone in the house, sitting on the sofa, opening the app on his phone. Now all he had to do was wait. The truth would come out whether Camilla liked it or not. When Irene, Camilla and Laura returned late that afternoon, Edward was still at home. Camilla found it strange, but he explained that he had decided to take the rest of the day off. They had dinner together, a tense meal where Camilla tried to maintain light conversation and Edward responded mechanically. Laura was quiet, still shaken by the morning's events, eating slowly under the watchful eye of Irene, who was serving the table. After dinner, Edward went up to put his daughter to bed, and for the first time in months he read her a story until she fell asleep. When he came downstairs, he found Camilla in the living room, already in her pajamas. "Edward, about this morning," she began, but he cut her off. "I'm tired, Camilla, let's talk another day." He went up to their room, got into bed and picked up his phone. He opened the camera app and started watching. He saw Irene in the kitchen washing the dinner dishes, saw Camilla in the living room watching television, saw the empty hallways. Everything seemed normal. But Edward knew it was only a matter of time. In the coming days, the cameras would capture the truth he needed to see. The next morning, Thursday, Edward left for work as usual, but this time with his phone set to receive notifications whenever the cameras detected movement or loud sound. During a meeting with architects, his phone vibrated. He made an excuse and left the room, opening the app. It was Camilla in the living room on the phone with someone. He put in his earbuds and listened. "I swear, Helen, I almost had a heart attack when I saw him standing in the doorway. I don't know how much he heard." The friend's voice on the other end was muffled, but Camilla's response was clear. "No, I made up some excuse about a child's tantrum. He seemed to buy it, but I'll have to put on a better act for a while. What a pain, I can't wait for him to travel again so I can have some peace." Edward felt anger rise in his throat, but he kept listening. "Irene? Oh, she's still playing her little mummy role. But as long as she does the dirty work, it's fine. I just pretend I don't see it." Edward closed the app, taking a deep breath to control his fury. Camilla had not a shred of remorse. This wasn't a mistake, not a moment of weakness. This was who she really was. He returned to the meeting but could barely concentrate. His mind was already working on the next step. Divorce. But not just any divorce. He would need evidence so solid that Camilla would have no escape, losing any right to the couple's assets. And that evidence was being recorded every second for the next 4 days. Edward lived a double life. In the morning he left for work as usual, but spent a good part of the day monitoring the cameras on his phone, watching the real life that unfolded in his house. At night he would return and feign normalcy, talking with Camilla about trivial matters, having dinner as a family, putting Laura to bed. It was an exhausting performance, but a necessary one. Every hour of accumulated recording was another piece of evidence for the case he was meticulously building. The images he captured were devastating. On Friday morning, he watched Camilla come downstairs in her robe at 10 o'clock, grab a juice from the fridge and return to her room without even asking where Laura was. The girl, at that moment, was with Irene in the garden, playing with soap bubbles, laughing genuinely for the first time that week. Edward saved the video, marking it as evidence. In the afternoon, he captured Camilla on the phone with her own mother, Mrs. Marcia, complaining about married life. "Mum, I can't stand pretending to like that child anymore. It's such a chore to have to smile at her when we have guests, thank God. Irene does everything, or I would have lost my mind by now." Mrs. Marcia's voice was equally despicable. "Just hang in there a bit longer, dear. You married well, you have a good life. When he turns 45, you can ask for a divorce and walk away with half of everything. It's worth it." Camilla laughed. "I know, that's why I'm here. But some days I really think about just leaving and putting it all behind me." Her mother scolded her. "Don't be foolish. Luxury costs money. Just ride it out." Edward paused the video, feeling nauseous. It was all calculated. The entire marriage was a financial fraud. On Saturday, taking advantage of some work commitments in the morning, Edward left early and monitored remotely. At 9 o'clock, he witnessed a scene that broke his heart. Laura was in the living room, holding a drawing she had made, and shyly approached Camilla, who was on the sofa on her phone. "Mummy, Camilla, I made this for you." The stepmother didn't even look up. "Leave it on the table," Laura insisted. "But I wanted to give it to you." Camilla sighed with impatience. "Laura, I'm busy. Go play in your room." The girl stood there holding the drawing and then asked in a small voice, "Don't you like me?" Camilla finally looked at her, and Edward saw the expression of pure annoyance on his wife's face. "I do, but you're very clingy. Go play by yourself for a bit." Laura dropped the drawing on the floor and ran upstairs crying. Camilla went back to her phone as if nothing had happened. Seconds later, Irene appeared in the living room, picked up the drawing from the floor, gave Camilla a look of restrained disapproval, and went upstairs to comfort the girl. Edward saved the video, his hands trembling with rage, but the worst was yet to come. On Monday afternoon, Edward witnessed the scene that would become the definitive proof. He was in a meeting when he received a notification of a loud sound detected in the kitchen. Discreetly, he opened the app and saw Irene and Camilla face to face. The governess was washing dishes, and Camilla approached with a threatening expression. "Irene, you're overstepping your boundaries again. I saw you hugging Laura in the garden this morning. I've already warned you about that." Irene turned, drying her hands. "Ma'am, she was crying. I was only comforting her." Camilla took a step forward, invading the governess's personal space, and her voice came out low and venomous. "Listen to me very carefully. If you tell Edward anything about how I treat Laura, about our conversations, about what happens here during the day, you will be fired on the spot. No references, no letter of recommendation, nothing. And you know what will happen to Laura? She'll be left with me. Alone. With me. Imagine what her life will be like without you here to protect her. So think very carefully before you open." "Your mouth!" Irene turned pale but maintained her straight posture. "I would never do anything to harm Laura, ma'am." Camilla smiled coldly. "Good. Then we'll continue with this silent agreement. You pretend I'm a good mother when he's here, and I'll pretend I don't care that she calls you mummy when we're alone. Everyone's happy." With that, Camilla left the kitchen. Irene remained still, holding onto the sink for support, and Edward watched as tears began to silently stream down the governess's face. He saved the video, feeling a mixture of rage towards Camilla and profound gratitude for Irene. That very evening, Edward acted. After putting Laura to bed, he went downstairs and found Irene in the kitchen organizing the pantry. "Irene, can I speak with you in the garden?" The governess was surprised but nodded. They went out to the yard, where the night was cool and quiet. Edward turned to her, and for the first time since this farce had begun, he allowed himself to be completely honest. "I know everything." Irene's eyes widened in fear. "Mr. Miller, He raised a hand gently. "You don't have to explain. I installed cameras in the house. I saw and heard everything. How Camilla treats Laura, how she treats you, how you've been the only real mother my daughter has known." Irene covered her face with her hands, sobbing. "I'm so sorry, sir. I tried to protect her, but I was afraid of losing my job and leaving her all alone. I didn't know what to do." Edward stepped forward and, to Irene's surprise, he hugged her. "You have nothing to be sorry for. You saved my daughter. You cared for her when I was too blind to see the truth. I'm the one who should be asking for forgiveness." Irene cried on her employer's shoulder, years of tension and fear finally escaping. When she calmed down, Edward stepped back and looked into her eyes. "I'm going to divorce Camilla. I have enough evidence to ensure she doesn't get a single penny. But before I do anything, I needed to thank you and to assure you that you will never be fired. Never. You are part of this family, Irene. Laura loves you, and I respect you more than you can imagine." Irene sobbed again, this time in relief. "Thank you, Mr. Miller. Thank you for believing me." They went back inside, and Edward went up to the bedroom. Camilla was in bed reading a fashion magazine. She looked up at him with a superficial smile. "You were down there for a while." Edward just nodded. "I was sorting some things out." He lay down on the other side of the bed, his back to her, and pretended to sleep while his mind worked on the final details of his plan. The next morning, Tuesday, he had a meeting scheduled with Henry Albright, one of London's most renowned lawyers, specializing in family law. The meeting took place in an elegant office in Canary Wharf. Edward arrived with a USB drive containing dozens of hours of recordings, organized chronologically. Henry, a man in his early 50s with graying hair and glasses, watched several selected clips with an increasingly serious expression. When the last video ended, he leaned back in his chair and whistled softly. "Edward, this is very serious. Emotional neglect, psychological abuse of a minor, coercion of an employee, explicit confession of marital fraud. You have enough material here to not only secure the divorce, but also to nullify any claim she has on joint assets." Edward leaned forward. "And the prenuptial agreement?" Henry smiled. "Ah yes, you mentioned she signed one. Let me see." Edward handed him a copy of the document. The lawyer read it carefully, and his smile widened. "Perfect. According to this agreement, in the case of a divorce with proven cause, especially for misconduct or fraud, she has no right to any assets acquired during the marriage. And with these recordings, proving misconduct will be trivial. She will leave with nothing." Edward felt an immense weight lift from his shoulders. "How long to prepare the documents?" Henry checked his schedule. "I can have everything ready by Friday. Divorce petition, petition for sole custody based on proven emotional neglect, a restraining order if necessary. Do you want me to notify her personally, or would you prefer to do it yourself?" Edward thought for a moment. He wanted to see Camilla's face when the truth came out. He wanted her to know that her lies had come to an end. "I'll do it. Prepare the documents and send them to me. I'll confront her on Monday night." Henry agreed, and they shook hands. "Stay strong, Edward. You're doing the right thing." The next few days were the longest of Edward's life. He continued to feign normalcy, having dinner with Camilla, talking about trivialities, while inside he counted the hours until the confrontation. Camilla, oblivious to what was coming, relaxed, thinking the incident from the previous Wednesday had been forgotten. She returned to her routine of neglect, confident that Edward remained blind. It was her biggest mistake. Monday arrived with a grey sky over London, as if the city itself sensed the storm that was about to break in the Miller mansion. Edward woke up early, but unlike every other day, he didn't leave for work. When Camilla came down to the kitchen in her robe, she found her husband sitting at the dining room table, already dressed in a suit with a leather briefcase in front of him and an expression she had never seen before. Cold, determined, unforgiving. "Edward, aren't you going to work today?" She tried to sound casual, but something in his posture put her on alert. Edward pointed to the chair across the table. "Sit down. We need to talk." Camilla felt her stomach churn, but she maintained her composure. She sat, crossing her legs and adjusting her robe. "All right, about what?" Edward opened the briefcase and took out a stapled document, placing it on the table between them. "About this, a divorce petition." The silence that followed was absolute. Camilla blinked several times, as if she hadn't heard correctly. "What? Edward, is this a joke?" Her voice went up an octave. "What are you talking about? Because of that argument last week?" "Darling, I already explained. It was just a moment of stress." Edward stared at her without blinking. "It wasn't just a moment. It was every day for 3 years. Every day you pretended to love my daughter in front of people and treated her like a nuisance when you were alone with her. Every day you humiliated and threatened Irene to maintain your charade." Camilla felt the floor disappear from under her feet, but she still tried to deny it. "I don't know what you're talking about. Who told you these lies? Was it Irene? She's trying to sabotage me because she's jealous of me, because Laura calls me Mummy." Edward raised a hand, cutting her off. "Enough lies, Camilla. I saw everything. I heard everything." He took out his phone and opened the camera app. 2 weeks ago, I had hidden security cameras installed throughout the entire house. I have hours and hours of recordings of you showing your true character. The color drained from Camilla's face. Edward turned the phone around and began playing the videos. First, the scene of her on the phone with her mother, admitting she was only in the marriage for the money. Then, the countless times she rejected Laura, calling the girl clingy, dirty, annoying. Next, the moment she threatened Irene in the kitchen, promising to fire her and leave Laura unprotected if she told the truth. Each video was a dagger in Camilla's carefully constructed farce. She tried to grab the phone, but Edward pulled it away. "It's no use, it's all saved to the cloud with copies on multiple servers. My lawyer already has access to everything. You can't erase the evidence." Camilla stood up abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. "Edward, please listen to me. I know I made a mistake, I know I was an idiot. But I can change. I promise I'll be better. I'll love Laura for real. I'll be the wife you deserve. Give me a second chance." Tears began to stream down her face, but they were tears of desperation, not remorse. Edward remained seated, impassive. "You had 3 years of chances, Camilla. 3 years, to be honest. 3 years to love my daughter. You chose to lie every single day, to manipulate everyone around you, and to use an innocent child as a stepping stone to a life of effortless luxury. There is no second chance for that." He pushed the document towards her. "Sign it." Camilla picked up the papers with trembling hands and began to read. Her eyes widened when she saw the terms: divorce with cause, sole custody of Laura. For Edward, activation of the misconduct clause from the prenuptial agreement resulting in no claim to joint assets. "Does this mean I leave with nothing?" Her voice was an incredulous whisper. Edward confirmed with a nod. "Exactly. No alimony, no division of assets, nothing that belongs to me or Laura. You signed a prenuptial agreement without reading it when we got married, remember? It was specified in there that in the case of proven fraud or misconduct, you would waive your right to everything, and I have more than enough proof of misconduct." Camilla let the papers fall onto the table, her eyes filling with genuine tears for the first time, not for love, but for the realization of her financial loss. "Edward, you can't do this to me. I gave up my career to marry you. I dedicated 3 years of my life to this family." Edward gave a humorless laugh. "Career? You were an events assistant earning £2,000 a month when we met. And dedication? Camilla, you dedicated nothing but lies. The only person who dedicated anything real to this family was Irene, and you treated her like dirt." He stood up, taking the briefcase. "You have until noon tomorrow to pack your bags and leave this house. You can take your clothes, your personal belongings. Nothing that was bought with my money during the marriage goes with you." Camilla threw herself to her knees, grabbing the hem of his trousers. "Please, Edward, I love you. I love Laura. I know I haven't shown it, but I can learn. Please, give me a chance." Edward stepped away, feeling repulsed. "You don't love me. You never did. And you definitely don't love Laura. If you did, you would have taken care of her. You would have been her real mother. Get up and sign the document, or I will file this legally and expose all the recordings in court. The choice is yours. Leave quietly or leave publicly humiliated." Camilla remained on her knees for a few more seconds, realizing there was no way out. Slowly she stood up, took the pen Edward was holding out, and signed the papers with trembling hands. Edward took the document, put it in his briefcase, and turned to leave. "Edward, wait." Her voice was broken. "What am I going to do? Where will I go?" He stopped at the door, without turning around. "That's not my problem anymore, Camilla. You made your choices. Now live with the consequences." He went upstairs, leaving her alone in the living room, her world crumbling around her. In Laura's room, Edward found the girl playing with Irene. The governess stood up quickly when she saw him enter, but he gave her a reassuring smile. "Irene, you can stay. In fact, I need to talk to you." He sat on the floor beside them, and Laura immediately climbed into her father's lap. "My little princess, Daddy needs to tell you something. Camilla is going to leave our house. She won't be living here with us anymore." Laura blinked, processing the information. "Is she going away forever?" Edward nodded. "Yes, forever." The girl thought for a moment and then asked, "And will Mummy Irene stay?" Edward looked at the governess, whose eyes were welling up with tears. "Mummy Irene will stay. In fact, I wanted to propose something, Irene. You are no longer just our employee. You are family. I want you to move into the guest room down the hall, to eat with us at the table, to officially be Laura's mother figure, not as an employee but as part of us. Do you accept?" Irene covered her mouth with her hands, tears streaming freely. "Mr. Miller, I don't know what to say. That would be an honor. An immense honor. Laura jumped from her father's lap and hugged Irene tightly. I love you, Mummy. Irene kissed the girl's head, her heart overflowing with happiness. I love you too, my love. So much. Edward joined the hug, and the three of them stood there, forming a real family, based on real love and not false appearances. When they separated, Edward wiped away his tears and smiled. Now we'll have to get the guest room ready for you. And tomorrow, as soon as Camilla leaves, we're going to have a party just for us. What do you think, Laura? The girl clapped her hands excitedly. A party? With cake? Edward laughed. With cake and everything else, and maybe we can spend the whole day playing at the park. No work, no worries, just the three of us. Laura beamed with happiness, and Irene smiled through her tears. For the first time in years, the Miller house had true joy circulating through its rooms. Edward spent the rest of the day helping Irene organize her things in the new room, while Camilla remained locked in the master bedroom, packing and crying. The next morning, Tuesday, Camilla came downstairs with 3 large suitcases and 2 handbags. Her face was swollen from crying, her makeup smudged. Edward was waiting in the living room, his arms crossed. A driver will take you wherever you want to go. After that, I want no more contact. Any necessary communication will be done through our lawyers. Camilla tried one last time. Edward, at least give me some money to start over. Just to rent a flat, get back on my feet. Edward's expression remained firm. No, you received 3 years of a luxurious life without working. That was more than enough. Now you'll have to manage like any ordinary person. Maybe then you'll learn the value of things. Camilla realized that begging would get her nowhere. She picked up her bags and walked to the door. Before leaving, she turned one last time. You'll regret this, Edward Miller. He replied calmly, The only thing I regret is taking so long to see who you really are. Have a good life, Camilla. She left, slamming the door, and Edward heard the sound of the car driving away. He went upstairs and found Laura and Irene at the bedroom window, watching the vehicle disappear down the street. Laura turned to her father with bright eyes. Is she really gone? Edward nodded. She is. And she's not coming back. The girl thought for a moment, and then smiled the most genuine smile he had ever seen. So now it's just us? You, me, and Mummy Irene? Edward picked his daughter up and reached out an arm, bringing Irene close as well. Exactly, it's the 3 of us, our family. The following months brought profound transformations to the Miller household. Edward drastically reduced his workload, delegating more responsibilities to trusted partners and prioritizing being present in Laura's life. He would spend mornings at the office and return every day at 3 in the afternoon to pick his daughter up from nursery school and play with her at the park. Irene flourished in her new role, no longer as an employee, but as the matriarch of the heart, caring for the house and Laura with even more dedication, now free from humiliation and threats. 6 months. After Camilla's departure, on a sunny April morning, Edward woke to the sound of laughter coming from the garden. He got up and went to the window. Down below, Laura was on the swing being pushed by Irene, who was singing a children's song while the girl laughed non-stop. The garden was full of flowers that Irene had planted, the grass green and well-kept, the fresh spring air carrying a sweet scent. Edward dressed quickly and went down to join them. Can I push too? He asked, approaching. Laura shouted excitedly, Daddy, come on, come on! Edward took Irene's place and began to push the swing gently, while the governess sat on a nearby bench, watching with a serene smile. The scene was perfect in its simplicity. A dedicated father, a happy child, and a woman who had found purpose in loving that family as if they were her own flesh and blood. After a few minutes, Laura asked to get down and ran to Irene, climbing into her lap. Mummy, I love you. Irene kissed the girl's forehead. I love you too, my little one. More than anything. Edward sat beside them on the bench, putting his arm around Irene's shoulders in a fraternal gesture. Are you happy here, Irene? The governess looked around at the blooming garden, at Laura in her lap, at Edward by her side, and felt her heart warm. I have never been so happy in my entire life, Mr. Miller. He smiled. Then we're even, because I've never been this happy either. And please just call me Edward. No more Mr. Laura, sitting between the two adults she loved most in the world, looked up with a child's bright eyes. Daddy, are we a real family now? Edward took his daughter's hand and Irene's, joining the three of them. We always were, Princess. It just took everyone a little while to realize it. Irene squeezed his hand back, tears of happiness streaming silently. There, in that sunny garden, under the blue London sky, three people who had suffered and fought finally found peace and true love. The Miller's story taught a valuable lesson. Family is not defined by marriage contracts, surnames, or blood ties. Family is defined by who chooses to stay during the difficult times, by who offers love without expecting anything in return, by who wipes away tears and celebrates smiles. It is defined by truth, dedication, and the courage to do what is right even when it's hard. Edward had learned this in the most painful way possible, but now, looking at Laura laughing in Irene's lap, he knew that every tear, every moment of pain, had been worth it. Because now he had something that no amount of money could buy, a true family, built on a foundation of genuine love. And Camilla? In the months that followed, she tried to return to the life she had before the marriage, but she discovered that 3 years of extravagance and laziness had destroyed any professional prospects she might have had. Her friends abandoned her when they found out she no longer had money to pay for expensive lunches and trips. Her mother took her back into the cramped flat in Croydon with bitter recriminations for having wasted the opportunity of a lifetime. Camilla tried to sue Edward, but the lawyers she consulted were unanimous. With the evidence of misconduct he had, she had no chance of overturning the divorce or getting any financial compensation. Eventually, Camilla found a job as a receptionist at a dental clinic, earning a modest salary that barely covered her basic expenses. Every night, upon returning to the small flat she shared with her mother, she would think of the mansion on the Bishop's Avenue, the designer clothes, the sophisticated dinners. And she would also think about how she had thrown it all away for pure greed and coldness of heart. Sometimes, late at night, she allowed herself a moment of genuine regret, not for the loss of money, but for the wasted chance to have truly loved a child who needed only affection. But those moments were rare and fleeting. Deep down, Camilla remained who she had always been, just poorer and more bitter. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope the story of Edward, Laura, and Irene has touched your hearts deeply. This narrative reminds us that true love is not found in appearances, but in the daily acts of care, dedication, and the courage to protect those we love. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and leave a like on the video. Every day, we bring you unique narratives that celebrate the complexity of life, the power of genuine love, and the strength of truth. Tell us in the comments, have you ever experienced or known a similar story? How would you have reacted in Edward's place? Your experiences and reflections enrich our community. Don't miss our upcoming content. Until the next story, and remember, a true family is the one we choose to build with love, not the one we merely pretend to have.